The Spanish Armada is the story of one of the most catastrophic failures in all of history. Our story starts in the 1580s when King Philip II of Spain decides that he wants to invade England. Now, there are two main reasons he wants to do this. Number one was that Spain was Catholic and believed that the Pope was the head of the church. England, however, was Protestant and rejected the Pope as head of the church. Two was that Spain owned the Netherlands, and there was a group of rebels forming in the Netherlands who were not such a big fan of that, and Queen Elizabeth I of England was supporting those rebels. Of course, King Philip and the Pope weren't such a big fan of these two things, so one day the Pope comes up to King Philip and is like, "Hey, you know what would be a good idea? Why don't you go invade England?" And King Philip turned to him and was like, "You know what? I think that's a good idea. What could possibly go wrong?" What could possibly go wrong? So here was the Spanish plan. They would assemble a fleet of ships that are so large and so intimidating that it would be impossible for them to be defeated. They would take their fleet up the English Channel and secure it. They would then stop in Calais in the Netherlands, pick up an army, then head back over to England and overthrow the Queen. Spain would build a massive army of 130 ships. On those ships were 2,500 guns, 8,000 seamen, and around 20,000 soldiers. They planned to do most of their fighting by boarding English ships. Spain would have a huge advantage fighting this way because their ships were much larger and their army was vastly superior. On May 19th of 1588, the Spanish Armada set off on its way to go take over England. Now, almost right away, there was a problem. The wind was blowing in the wrong way. Now, it's possible to sail a ship when the wind is blowing the wrong way. There's a sailing technique called tacking, but the Spanish ships were very large and not very agile. It took them a whole month to reach the English Channel, and by that time, the English had received word of the incoming Spanish invasion and had more than enough time to prepare. The two fleets first met on July 31st, as accounted by an English naval commander, Jim Hawkins. He wrote that, "We met the fleet somewhat to the westward of Plymouth upon Sunday in the morning. We had some small fight with them." From the 21st to the 26th, the Armada sailed down the channel into Calais. The English ships stayed a safe distance away, attacking from afar. The Spanish ships were sailing in a semicircle, which made it harder for the English to attack them. During this time, not much happened. One of the Spanish captains accounted that, "The third day we skirmished for 5 or 6 hours without any ship lost. The fourth day we fought for 4 hours without any ship lost. By the 26th day, they had came before Calais and anchored themselves, at which they came successor to the Queen's ships 25 more. By the time they actually ended up getting to Calais, the English had only managed to sink 2 of the Spanish ships." The Spanish had failed to secure the English Channel, but at least they had made it to Calais and now they were docked there safely. Or at least that's what they thought. On the night of the 29th, the English sent 8 burning ships into the Spanish harbor at Calais. This understandably caused confusion and chaos among the Spanish ships. They all booked it out of the harbor as fast as they could, and due to the continuing confusion, the English were able to chase them northward up England. The English ships eventually stopped chasing them and turned around because they were running low on resources. The Spanish were now in a horrible situation. They had failed to secure the channel, were chased out of their own ports, and were now up by the north of England running low on supplies. And just to make things worse, the wind was again blowing in the wrong direction. The only way for them to continue home was to continue north around England and then continue around Ireland and Scotland. The ship set off in a very disorganized manner. At this point, they had pretty much decided it was every ship for itself. This was when another major problem occurred. You see, the ships had different maps of Ireland, and some of them just didn't have this one section of Ireland mapped onto them. So this, mixed with continuing poor weather, led many of the Spanish ships to crash into the coast of Ireland, where the shipwrecks still remain to this day. By the time the fleet arrived back at Spain, they only had 65 of the original 130 ships and had lost about 15,000 members of the crew. So this does raise the question of why did this attack fail? The Spanish seem to have everything on their side. Personally, I think it just comes down to really poor circumstances. If the Spanish had the wind on their side when they left, they would have been able to make it to England with no problem, and the English wouldn't have had time to prepare. This also brings up an equally thought-provoking question, which is what would have happened if Spain did take over England? And this is a harder question to answer, but it is easy to say that the Western world, as we know it, would be entirely different. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this frankly ridiculous story, and I hope I left you something to think about. Bye.